rather than just like, you know, kill. You've got to kind of work with them a little bit to be able to keep playing yourself. Snakes and ladders represents no matter how well you seem to be going, at any stage you might actually fall down a ladder and bad luck's going to come your way, which you know, is kind of a nice reflection of how life can be as well sometimes. And it pointed out that the Victorian version of this game, the ladders represented values like faith and honesty and religious beliefs, and the snakes were evil ideas, so it had a lot of ideology represented in how your luck was going to work, but apparently it was originally based on an Indian game, which was more about spiritual values and more about the Zen, you know, elements of life and how good and bad forces were always going to be affecting you, but you could sort of work with them. I should probably put that a little bit later. So he's got these 4 types of games, and he's looking at where the rules are created, whether someone writes the rules beforehand or whether the rules are actually generated throughout the game, and where they reside during gameplay, whether they're in the game itself or in the player or in some sort of external source like a book or an umpire. The reason that image is there is because for anyone who was at the Field of Play launch at Digital Harbour a few weeks ago, you would have actually heard all this. And that talk was a little bit more specifically about how play in public space can have an impact upon the way we think about public space and what we're allowed to do with it, and how controlled our behaviour should be in public spaces. That's because Troy Innocent's work, if you don't know it, is actually installed into the actual architecture of Digital Harbour. It's quite an interesting work from that perspective. But I'll come back to that. So, Rod Humble's type 1. The rules are created in advance by a game designer. There's few enough rules that you can actually keep them in your head while you're playing, and it uses like simple board games as an example of this. For type 2, they're created in advance, but then there's usually the rules are too complex, or part of the gameplay is uncovering the rules so that the player themselves doesn't know all the rules whilst they're playing. There might be an umpire or some book that's used as a reference or used to help uncover gameplay. For type 3, they're created in advance, but then as you play, the actual rules change or new rules are created. And he's using role-playing games as an example of a game like that. And for type 4, they're created at the start of the game rather than written in advance and then modified as the game is played. And he was using like children's gameplay as an example where you just make it up on the spot and then you play it and you can change the rules, and it can be a sort of collaborative authoring effort of what the rules are. And in his paper it goes into a bit of detail about how these sorts of rule structures or methods for experiencing rules work within digital computer games, because for the last 2, it's quite complex AI to be able to actually have a computer system which can come up with its own rules, or which will allow you to write new rules into the game. And he couldn't really even come up with any examples of games that did it, but he was really interested in like the possibilities involved. But I think there's a couple of games which have been mentioned online and through Select Parks which do actually allow the player to play with the rules a bit in quite an interesting way, and I reckon there's a lot of potential for exploring this sort of area artistically. Eclectic by Jonas Heilshah, I don't know how to pronounce his surname, is a little game for for PSP, and it uses wireless LAN to the idea is that you have to move around and find wireless network access points. And as you find them, you kind of collect symbols, and each of the symbols represents different things. Some of them represent like the strength of the signal to the wireless network. The white star there, I think, represents like an open wireless network, and you can actually try and connect to it through the game. But if you do, you might actually lose the game because you are effectively breaking the law by accessing someone's wireless network, or at other times it'll actually make you win the game, and you don't actually know what's going to happen. There's like an element of randomness there which can reflect. Thanks, almost done. What can happen in real life as well, like whether or not you're going to be caught by breaking rules. But the interesting part about this game is the player defines at the start how long the game is going to be, and they can actually play it for an unlimited amount of time if they want. So they've got control over one of the key elements of a game, which is like the length of time you've got to complete the task in. And because it's a portable device, you're actually able to control the amount of space that you're playing the game in as well. So just kind of a simple example of a game that's letting people play with the rules a bit themselves. This crazy project called Tagging the City is by the Ludic Society from Zurich, and they're kind of like really extreme conceptual situationist artists who made an immersive game. I call it a game, but they actually claim it's not a game, it's only about play. The reason for that being that you actually, you kind of make up the rules while you're playing. They just give you the tools to play, and there's no real outcome. You can't really win or not win. In this game, you're given this pack at the start, which has got tools for finding RFID tags around the city. It's got a sniffer so you can find other ones, and it's actually got the funny pine smelly car thing that's there actually can D-tag RFID tags. So if you go into a shop or a library, say they've got RFID tags on the books, it's actually, it's got an electromagnetic pulse in it that can actually wipe out the data from them.
Uh-huh.
So at the start of the game, you're actually injected with your own RFID tag into your skin. So you kind of become like a first player, first person player in real life. And this is used to track your movements around the city. And then other stuff in the pack includes like stickers, so you can just tag things conceptually. There's no actual real RFID tag there. A stencil so you can graffiti on stuff. And you basically run around the whole city devaluing things. And the idea there is that it's kind of complex. I've got like 6 pages just describing how this game works. But basically, you're sort of all the tags that you create in the city then get loaded up into a Google map, and your devaluing of real objects and making them virtual objects has kind of sucked them into like the Internet of Things, where everything is part of like an information system, a virtualized information system, and you yourself are a part of that as well. I think I'm about out of time, so I probably won't say much more about it. It's also kind of hard to describe. So yeah, like that's one of those games where their conceptual approach to it is that there aren't really any rules because it's about breaking rules. So there's no real game there, but the experience of play has made it a game anyway. Anyways, there's 2 URLs, select parks and Artabases, the arts database I was talking about them building. Thanks for listening.
What we might do with the rest of the session is that maybe start off with some questions within the panel and then go to audience questions. But if anyone wants to kind of comment or question on the topics that we're discussing, if you just put up your hand, that would be great. So I'm going to sort of start it up with a question to the whole panel, which is about a topic which Justin's already touched on, which I think is something that's almost need to get out of the way with serious games, and that is how many serious games that so many of the early serious